Meeting of the Wooddale Community Development Commission. My name is Sean Conway, and I'm the attorney for the Wooddale Community Development Commission. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Ms. Rudnicki?
Here.
Mr. Babowis?
Here.
Mr. Parenti?
Here.
And Mr. Tao?
Here.
Okay, the CDC has a quorum present. Due to the temporary absence of Mr. Ochoa, who is our CDC chairman, we need to have a motion to appoint Member Parenti as chairman pro tem. Can I have that motion, please? Okay. Do we have a second? I'll second. Okay, any discussion? All right, Madam Secretary, can you please call the roll on that?
Okay. Mr. Babowis?
Here.
Ms. Rudnicki?
Here.
Mr. Parenti?
Here.
Mr. Tao?
Here.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do that vote again. So the vote is either yes or no on having Mr. Parenti be our chairman pro tem. So if we could just do the roll again.
Mr. Tao?
Yes.
Mr. Parenti?
Yes.
Ms. Rudnicki, sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Babowis?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. The motion passes, and Mr. Parenti is our chairman pro tem. Mr. Parenti, do you have any comments?
Yes. Chairman Parenti, Mr. Conway is chairman. I request that you will serve as a CDC meeting facilitator.
Absolutely. I'll serve as the CDC meeting facilitator for tonight. Okay, so let's move on to our business items for tonight. Our first business item is the meeting minutes for May 20th, 2024. Can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes for May 20th, 2024?
Motion.
And do I have a second?
I will second.
Okay.
Who was that seconded? Mr. Tao, thank you.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes, say yes. All opposed, say no.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, the yeses have it, and the meeting minutes for May 20th, 2024 are approved. Okay, let's move on to our public hearing for tonight. For our public hearings, all testimony will be given under oath. At the hearing, there'll be the opportunity for the public to offer testimony and to comment. Following the public hearing, the CDC's deliberations will be open to the public in the sense that all are invited to listen and to watch. The public, however, may not speak during the CDC's deliberations. We ask that the applicant here tonight give specific evidence to demonstrate that the proposal meets the standards of approval for the request. The burden is on the applicant to prove the case. With respect to others who wish to speak, you may give an opinion or present specific evidence as to why you believe the applicant meets or fails to meet the standards for the request. Finally, we'll strictly adhere to the schedule prepared for tonight's meeting. However, those wishing to submit evidence and testimony will be afforded sufficient time which to do so. Whether you're a member of the public wishing to make a statement for the record or a witness testifying on behalf of the applicant, you'll be placed under oath and you'll begin by stating your name and address. You'll be subject to questions by the Community Development Commission and potential cross-examination by the applicant. To allow as many people as possible to be heard, we would request that you limit your remarks to 5 minutes. If additional time is needed, the hearing will be continued until the next available hearing date. Okay, calling tonight's one and only matter, it's CDC 2024-0005. This case involves proposed text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code, and to the Sign Code, Chapter 13. The purpose of the text amendments is to clarify certain definitions and regulations, including but not limited to regulations related to accessory structures, landscaping, parking, zoning applications, public improvements, and to correct discrepancies and typos within the text, and to add regulations pertaining to electric vehicle charging. Staff, can you please indicate when notice of the hearing was published and whether you have a certificate of publication from the newspaper?
And you would raise your right hand, state your name and address, please.
Gosha Pocheja, 404 North Wooddale Road in Wooddale, Illinois.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the public hearing notice for tonight's meeting was published in Daily Herald on June 28th, and we do have a certificate of publication on file.
Okay, great. Seeing as how this is basically a city-initiated proposal, staff, do you have a presentation for the CDC tonight?
Yes, we do. Thank you. So just as a quick recap of the packet that was provided to you last week, there are a number of changes that are being proposed. Majority of them are to Chapter 17, which is our Unified Development Ordinance, our zoning regulations. There are a couple changes in Chapter 13, which is our sign code, which also falls within the CDC's purview. On the screen right now, we see a list of all the proposed changes that were outlined in the memo. And what I'll do right now, I'll fairly quickly go through them, but feel free to ask questions if there's anything in particular, or we can have all the questions at the very end, whatever works the best. So the very first one that we have is adding authorized variation to allow someone to seek a variation from tree replacement requirements. So currently, as you're aware, Article 2 of Chapter 17 has very specific requirements and procedures for all of our zoning applications. One of them are the zoning variations, and zoning variations have a section that's called authorized variations. So if someone is doing a project or any type of development, they have to meet the code. They have to meet all the requirements in Chapter 17, unless if they cannot, they may have the ability to request a variation from a particular code section. But that type of request, it has to be listed in the authorized variations. For example, you could request a variation for, let's say, a setback, because that is an authorized variation. What we do not have in our authorized variations are relief or the ability for someone to seek a variation for any type of landscape regulation. So our landscaping regulations is a specific article in Chapter 17. They do have some flexibility built into them where someone could request an administrative variation that's reviewed by staff, but it's really only 25%, and sometimes that number doesn't always translate to a lot, depending on, like, for example, how many parking islands are needed and so on. So what we have noticed over the years, there are some particular sites in Wooddale where there's a significant number of trees. And as you are aware, our landscape regulations require quite a significant number of replacement trees for every tree that gets removed. And we are definitely in support of that. But sometimes we get to a situation where that number of required replacement trees just cannot be accommodated on site in addition to that development. The applicant could pay a fee in lieu of $650 per tree, but that's still significant if we're talking hundreds and hundreds of trees that need to be planted. So all that we are proposing is to add the tree replacement regulation as an authorized variation. So at least the applicant could come in before CDC, go through the public hearing process. They would have to meet all the standards. They have to make a case for themselves and seek relief from this. So whether it's a reduction in number or whatever that combination may be. Because as of right now, that's not an option at all. The only way applicants have been able to do it in the past if they go through a special use for planned unit development, which obviously that's quite extensive application process for the applicants. So all that we are proposing here is to expand the list of authorized variation to only include the fact that the applicant could seek relief or zoning variation for the number of required replacement trees. So that's the first one. The second one we also have in Article 2 is related to special use limitations. Some of you may recall that under our old UDO, prior to the change in 2022, when a special use was approved, it was really tied to a property, which meant that even if property owners or operators changed, that special use could continue. There was a revision in our current UDO suggested by the consultant, I believe, at the time, where it really should be tied to the applicant or the property owner. But then what happened, let's say if a particular business was already established, but maybe the property owners wanted to sell the property, or the business owners wanted to sell the property, whoever wanted to purchase that existing operation, they would have to go through a special use process with the city, again, even for the same type of operation. So what we're proposing is essentially to revert it back to what the code used to say and to have it tied with the property. What we have done on some of the recent applications is we specifically requested it in the ordinance that the special use approvals that we've seen over the last few months be tied to the property anyway, which is an option. But what we're trying to do is make a code change so it doesn't have to happen as an ordinance. It's just something that automatically will be tied to the property. And keep in mind that I guess the key is that the continuation of that same special use as it was approved is required. So it's not like, well, I'm going to use this special use, but I'm going to do things some differently. Like, that is the key, that they have to continue the same use as it was approved originally. And that's our special use. So that takes us to public improvements. These are a couple things we've been talking with our Public Works Department, and this really talks about sort of triggers that are required, triggers that would require a property owner or developer or a builder to install public sidewalk along the entire length of the property, and then also to plant street trees in the parkway right away. So this is something we really have been enforcing because we do have some mechanisms in our engineering standards. There's some mention in our UDO, and so really the key here is to clarify the language so no one can say, well, that's not really what it says. So what we're saying is that if someone comes in and builds a new single-family home and there is no public sidewalk, they, as the developer of that parcel, will be required to construct that sidewalk, because that's the idea. We want connectivity between the parcels. Same thing with the trees. If there aren't any street trees, they would have to work with our Public Works Director, because ultimately the Public Works Director is the only one that really has the authority to plant trees in the parkway. But that is something that also will be required. So as I mentioned, a lot of them are mentioned in our engineering standards manual, so we're kind of doing references, cross-references between different code sections just to make sure that we can enforce these rules. The driveway, sidewalk, and parking lot exception, this is also another clarifying text amendment. These sort of flat work items, like for driveways, sidewalk, public sidewalks, they are accessory flat work as opposed to an accessory structure that has a roof, like a shed. So what we're trying to clarify is that these do not fall under the same setback requirements as, for example, a shed would. This is really to kind of keep it in line with how we've interpreted the code in the past. In a lot of cases, we have multiple residential properties where the driveways are abutting between the two properties. They have a shared driveway. So obviously, if they come in for a replacement and they apply for a permit, we can't enforce the 5-foot setback separation, because that's not how this driveway is in existence. And same thing really applies to private sidewalks. We are proposing, however, to add a regulation on private sidewalks that it be no longer than 5 feet. So what we're trying to avoid is a situation where someone comes in and they say, oh, well, I'm going to have this sidewalk or walkway on the side of my home, but it's very wide, and they ended up using as a patio, for example. Patios are not always permitted. They're actually only permitted in the rear, so not in the front or the side. So the regulation, the 5-foot regulation, is only meant to make sure that this is just a walkway and is never going to be used for anything else. The above-ground pool, once again, another clarifying text amendment. So with the adoption of the revised UDO in 2022, it was clarified that the above-ground pools do not count towards lot coverage, because in a way it's a structure that, you know, after a few years could be temporary structure. So the calculations are excluded from lot coverage, from the 40% lot coverage. This was the direction of City Council at the time. And what happened is we defined it, we updated the definition of above ground pool to just say that it's excluded from lot coverage. So all we're doing with this text amendment is there is a particular section in our UDO that talks about all the other regulations for above ground pools. So we're just adding a little statement in there stating the same, that they're excluded from lot coverage. So this is no change really, it's just adding it in another section in our code, so it's a lot easier for us to enforce, to make sure that whoever's doing reviews does not miss it. The lot width definition, and the clarifying one, our definition really talks about measuring the lot depth at the building line, whereas other sections in the code really talk, you measure at the front yard line and so on. So there's just a discrepancy. They really mean the same thing, but because in the definition it's talking about the building line, we just wanted to strike that particular conflict so it's very easy for everyone to know how to measure. You just go to the definition, figure out how to measure it, and then you're able to do it. So this is strictly clarifying. There's no change. The biggest change that we are proposing is really related to electric charging stations. So you may be familiar, pretty much everywhere around us, we see them popping up in private parking lots. So we wanted to propose some regulations, some limitations in terms of screening required, striping, signage, and so on. So this is the portion that also has a section in our Chapter 13. That's where we propose some limitation on signage, just to make sure that there isn't anything that's too large or too excessive. Parking in striped spaces only. This is also something that we've already been enforcing, but we wanted to clarify that in our code as well. So this isn't really a change. This is really meant to ensure that in our commercial parking lots, vehicles are parked only in their designated striped parking spaces. This is just to make sure that the drive aisles are clear, there's circulation, and there's access for emergency vehicles. So pretty straightforward, but we wanted to clarify it. Vehicular use area landscape regulations percentage. That one is a bit tricky for us to explain when it comes to applicants. So this was an addition to the 2022 UDO, and it was suggested by a consultant. Really, the idea was that if you have larger parking lots, they wanted to introduce a little bit more landscaping sort of inside of the parking lot. But the way it is defined, it's very tricky for landscape architects or architects to calculate it, to present it, to submit it to us. We always go back and forth, and they're like, well, that's already included. The main reason for that is our code already requires landscape islands inside the parking lot. We have perimeter landscaping, we have parking lot perimeter landscaping, we have foundation landscaping. So there's a lot of landscaping that's already existing. So what we are proposing is to remove these additional regulations, because we haven't really found there's a lot of benefit in the recent projects that we've done. And once again, it creates a lot of confusion for the applicants. And we feel that the remaining regulations that are in place would be sufficient. There are a few graphics that we are correcting. This is really just the text was correct, the definition was correct, but the graphic was not showing it correctly. In these two examples, actually Andy modified them, thank you. He ended up adding the property line indication. So we just wanted to make sure that for intersection setbacks and for street transition requirement, the measurement is taken from the property line, which is the right-of-way line. The graphics before showed it measured from the curb line, which did not meet our definition. And lastly, there are a number of Scrivener's errors and some references that we've noticed, some, especially when it related to the overlay districts. We have the TCC overlay district, and sometimes it was called TIO. We also found just a couple references to sections that were off by a number, and so that those are all listed in your staff memo. Nothing significant, no significant change. It's really just clarifying and kind of catching these errors as we come across them. So in terms of public comment, we have not received any comment or questions related to this petition. Our legal team did review it, and there are no objections raised. Therefore, we recommend that CDC recommend approval of the proposed changes, as we find that they are consistent with the comprehensive plan and with the UDO. I do want to add that our code does not have standards for approval, or findings of facts are not required for text amendments, but we still kind of look through compliance with the overall intent of the UDO. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Gosha. I just want to give you guys some historical context here too, and as to why staff is coming before you with some of these proposed changes. In 2022, the city did a complete overhaul of the zoning code. They had a consultant come in, the consultant suggested, a bunch of changes, kind of rewrote the whole code. So it is not uncommon when you do a whole code rewrite like that. After working with it for a couple of years, staff notices, okay, we need to tweak this, we need to tweak that, make sure it's clear for developers, make sure it's got clear definitions and things like that. So, that's why staff is here today suggesting these tweaks to the code to make sure it's more user-friendly and consistent, fixes some of the Scrivener's errors and things like that. So, it's pretty common in all municipalities who do complete overhauls of code. So just wanted to say that. Given that, are there any questions for staff as to any of the particular suggestions that they're making tonight?
Yeah, I think you did a great job,
Thank you.
and
It was a team effort.
it made sense, everything that you brought up. Were there problems down the road with when you were working with an applicant? Is that kind of what triggered it, or?
Some of the things. I think some of them, especially when we're talking to people and for the graphics, for example, we could use the graphics to explain to people how to measure, for example, the transition that's required for a parking lot because our graphic was not correct. So they weren't major problems per se, but we kind of noticed over time, well, we need to fix it. So we do have an ongoing list of things. So once in a while, as we kind of collect a couple of the things together, we'll be bringing them in front of you so we can make our UDO better.
Let me ask you one other question, kind of not really related to this, but are there any things in the code that are prohibiting some people from doing a project development or anything in the city of Wooddale and maybe going to Bensonville or Itasca or something like that?
Well,
that
I
you're aware
hope
of?
not. No, so not that we're aware of. So that's why we kind of bring these text amendments, and also the applicant has the ability to request a text amendment as well. So it doesn't have to come from the city. So one example we have, I believe it was right after we approved, the city council approved the rewrite of the new UDO in 2022. We did have an applicant come in for a amendment to the table of permitted uses because there was a particular use he was interested in. He had the property under contract, and he petitioned to add that use as a permitted use in that particular zoning district, and it was approved. So there's always a way to work with a particular property owner or future business owner to change the code if needed, if that's something that falls within the intent of the UDO and the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, let me ask you one other thing, again, not related. Now, I've only been back, for a little over a month, but there's a lot of things that I had hoped by the time I got back I would see under construction, and is there anything going on or anything?
There's a lot going on. We'll be happy to, if you wanted to step by, we can give you an update, but there are a number of projects that are happening outside of the proposed text amendments.
Okay, I mean, there's just some of the, like the 5-story thing
It's
that
coming.
we went through.
Yeah.
How's that coming along?
Can I keep going?
Yeah, I prefer, Member Babowitz, if you have
Yeah.
particular questions
Yeah.
about specific developments, maybe just contact staff.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of, wondering what's.
No, absolutely, completely understand. I just want to make sure, because this is a specific proceeding specific to
That's
these
fine.
text amendments, so.
No problem.
Just want to keep the record.
No problem.
Cleared up. So, yeah, but I definitely encourage you to reach out to Gosha and staff on those things.
Got a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I could see changes to text coming up when there are different departments working on things and they're trying to coordinate things. And the old procedures, one department might be going one way and they say, no, that's not what we're supposed to do as far as the UDO is calling for this. The departments have to be in line as well. And so making the text clarified, it irons all that out.
That's the hope, exactly.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
I have one. As far as the charging stations that, say an existing building has 50 parking spaces, okay? So they want to put in two charging spots. So does that screw up the parking lot as far as spaces?
So I'm not, what do you mean, like the percentage or the total number of required spaces?
You know, say there's 50 spots and they're all taken. So the charging station has to come in, so now somebody's gonna lose their
Yes,
spot.
so there is, I think there's a limitation, like, so you have to be able to provide the code required parking. And I believe there's a specific percentage, I think it's like 10% of the minimum required number of on-sites. So they cannot exceed a certain percentage of the total number of parking spaces, the electronic charging stations.
Gotcha.
So we could work with them in terms of like how many. I think they could have up to, and I'm looking at Andy because Andy was the one that did a lot of research on this.
Hey, why don't we swear Andy in, and he can give his statements.
Please raise your right hand and state your name, please, and address.
Yes. Andrew Coteras, 404 North Wooddale Road, Wooddale, Illinois.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Yes, just to clarify, the rate at which EV, electric vehicle parking spaces, count towards minimum parking requirements, they do count towards minimum parking requirements 1-to-1. But if you have more than 10% of the total parking spaces allocated to EVs, any number above that would no longer count.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Thank you.
So it's not a maximum of
Right.
10%, but it's just the point at which those spaces no longer count towards the minimum parking requirement.
Got you.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Okay, now's the time where I call on the public to offer their comments, but
No one's there.
yeah, we've got it sort of a slight crowd tonight. So there being no further public comment, I'll make a last call for questions before we close the public hearing and move on to deliberation. Any last questions or comments? Okay, great. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to ask for a motion to close the public hearing in this case. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Okay, so this is a yes or no vote just to close the public hearing portion. That will bring us into deliberations. So can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bebowis,
Here?
Mr. Rudnick.
So again, this is a yes or no?
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes or no, please.
What?
He said yes.
Okay, he did, okay. Ms. Rudnicki,
Yes.
Mr. Parenti,
Yes.
and Mr. Tao.
Yes.
Okay, so the public hearing portion of this case is closed. Now we move on to deliberations. So this is the point of the case where members are allowed to sort of express their opinions, their views on this particular request. Does any member have an opinion or a view on this request?
I just have an opinion. I'm glad to see that the pool thing was taken care of because we actually applied for a pool permit and were shut down because we were 41%. And we still haven't gotten a pool, but it's nice to see that other people could get a pool.
Okay, all right, very good, very good. Any other views or opinions on the proposal tonight? Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to proceed to a vote on the proposal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read into the record the suggested motion. If you are in favor of what staff is proposing tonight, you will vote yes. If you are not in favor and do not want to recommend approval, you will vote no. Okay, so the motion is quite lengthy because it's legal in nature, but at the end of it, again, a yes vote is you're supporting the staff proposal, a no vote is you're against the staff proposal. Okay, here's the motion. Based on the submitted petition and the testimony presented, the proposed text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code, and to the Sign Code, Chapter 13 of the Municipal Code, are consistent with the comprehensive plan and are in keeping with the purpose and intent of the UDO, and therefore I move that the Community Development Commission adopt the recommendations of the staff memo dated July 15th, 2024, as the findings of the Community Development Commission, and recommend to the City Council approval of the text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 17, and the Sign Code, Chapter 13, in case number CDC 2024-0005, as proposed. Anyone can say so moved.
So moved.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Babowitz. Any further discussion? Okay. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call vote?
Mr. Babowitz.
Yes.
Ms. Rudnicki.
Yes.
Mr. Parenti.
Yes.
And Mr. Tao.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. The recommendation of the CDC will be to the City Council to approve the proposed text amendments. That will go forward at the next PZB meeting, I suspect. And so that concludes the hearing matter for tonight. I'll just move on to the remainder of the business items on the agenda. Is there any staff liaison report tonight?
Well, I guess maybe I'll take a moment to provide a quick update because Mr. Babowitz raised a question, sort of developmental update. So obviously, we've had a number of projects come through CDC over the last few months. I'll start with the apartment buildings because that's something that has not made it to CDC yet. So you are aware the property directly to the south of City Hall, the 372. We've worked with a number of developers over the years. Usually we would go through zoning entitlement process, maybe get closer to construction, but there was either financing issues, cost of construction, something always kind of worked out where the developer would not move forward. So we are working with a new developer. A couple of months ago, there was a memorandum of understanding signed between the developer and City Council, and they've engaged all of their consultants to start putting together an application. So we're hopeful we're going to have a new proposal come through a zoning entitlement process. So that's coming hopefully soon. A couple of the other updates, the data center. So obviously that is a very massive project. The Bryn Mawr sort of development, multiple phases. There's really 3 phases of development. The Nippon building obviously is already constructed. We have a permit under review for building number 1 for the data centers. Building number 2 will have to come back to CDC for a final PUD process. We've recently completed the annexation of 60-some properties in phase 3, and they were rezoned to I-1, but the applicant will be coming in for a PUD. The property owners have since acquired the 7 properties that were sort of not included in the first phase, so they will be coming back to CDC. We've received their application for annexation to the city and rezoning, so that one will be coming very shortly as well, followed by a full PUD process. In terms of things that are ongoing, so obviously Marinos has gone through a zoning entitlement process a while ago, so they're working on building permits right now. Hopefully we're very close. Sweet Baby Ray's was another project that has gone through CDC for the parking lot. That one's completed actually. We also had, I jotted down a couple of lists of items that I wanted to. Weagle's another one. They went through lot consolidation where they will be combining 2 buildings, so they have some ongoing construction in one of the buildings, but eventually I believe we do have a permit, and we received it a while ago. It's still under review for the actual connection between the 2 buildings. So a lot of these things are ongoing. One of the things that is not really part of CDC, it wasn't been discussed at CDC recently, but we do have a vision plan from 2013, and one of the projects that the city staff is working on, there was an RFP that was sent out a couple weeks ago for a redevelopment of a community park to the south of City Hall. So there are a lot of projects that are sort of ongoing, and some of them have either finished CDC and they're going through City Council, they have maybe finished City Council, or they're in the permitting process. But as always, feel free to give us a call. Give me a call if you have particular questions. Maybe we'll try to do a little bit better in terms of updates at a CDC meeting, so you kind of know where the projects are, but there's definitely a lot going on.
The Park District as well.
Correct. The Park District,
Boston.
yes. So they've applied for permit. Yet they applied for annexation to the city and the special use for the playground. That was all approved, and we have building permits under review right now. So I know they're eager to break ground.
Okay, great. Any other questions for staff? All right, fantastic. Another successful meeting. We just need a motion to adjourn. Can I get a motion?
that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, say no. The yeses have it. This meeting stands adjourned. Thank you very much.